Once again, I got your attention. It's a great turnout, which is not at all a surprise to us. Always a pleasure to have Nick Hornby here. We've had him a number of times. Some of you will probably be here for some of his other books. And introducing him tonight is Mallory Ortberg, who has caused a lot of trouble at this store because I've passed booksellers who are reading this text from Jane Eyre, her new book, laughing so much they're ignoring customers. So, so Mallory is great, but she's costing us money. Mallory's the co-founder of The Toast, feminist general interest site, The Toast. She previously wrote for Gawker, The Atlantic, and Hairpin, and she will introduce our special guest tonight. So would you please welcome Mallory Ortberg and Nick Hornby.
Hi everyone. I feel like I don't need to introduce you because you came out with me.
Yeah, did I do the wrong thing?
A little. This is Nick Hornby.
He said, here's both of us. And I thought, oh, I should come out.
So really, he messed it up.
I think he messed it up.
All right, let's blame it on him. Well, it's really fun to be here, and to be here with you. You wrote a book. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You must be so excited. And you wrote a funny book, which is really wonderful for a man. Your wife must be proud. But it's such a fun book, and it's such a unique book, and I don't know how many of you guys have gotten the chance to read it, but I love how much it's both a book about a woman, and it's also, I feel like, a workplace comedy, and it's almost like a workplace romance in the sense that this is about a woman who falls in love with a group of people and a group of colleagues, which is remarkable and not something you see often. And I love so much that you set this kind of during the TV landscape of the 1960s and sort of asked the question, why wasn't there a UK equivalent of Lucille Ball? And I would love to talk with you a little bit about that, because there should have been one, and now you wrote her. And that's fantastic.
Well, the more I looked at it, the more I thought about it, it just seems like you guys were lucky with Lucille Ball. That she was such a unique person at a particular time, and because you had her, then there were wave after wave of female comedians that we just didn't have, and I think that there was this gap. We had a lot of good comedy writing and comedy performance, but it was all guys, and then you had, you know, Goldie Hawn and Mary Tyler Moore, and on and on and on and on, and it took us way longer, I think, to get going. I
remember in one of your other interviews you talked about Monty Python, and the closest equivalent they had was just the woman who stood around in a bikini.
Yes.
She looks fantastic.
She looked great.
She really did.
Something for the gentleman.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, there wasn't that same sort of rich tradition of women hosting their own shows, or even like the Carol Burnett show, that kind of variety that we had. I have to say, I did not truly appreciate Carol Burnett until earlier this year when somebody finally showed me the kidnapping sketch, where she keeps rehearsing her speech to the men who have kidnapped her husband, and starts getting really roped into the whole Hollywood aspect of it, and at the end of it she gets really upset because she thinks she didn't get emotional enough. And I just think that that's so fantastic. And I was thinking especially about some of your other interviews. You talked about working with Rosamund Pike, and the work that you did for an education, and how in some ways kind of her experience about how she's so lovely in a really ethereal way. People don't think of her as somebody who would want to do comedy, or who could.
That's what started it, started the character, was she has this part in education which is a comedic part, and she said afterwards, nobody ever lets me be funny. And I thought that was kind of a reference to the way she looked, and I think there is a sense that if you are very beautiful, especially in that English rose kind of way, you damage the brand if you let yourself make faces.
It's a pain I know only too well. It's a burden.
too big, I
It
thought.
was. I would call it insulting.
It was really long.
But no, and I think it's interesting too, especially because Lucille was a glamour girl in the 30s and 40s. You know, she was a pinup girl, and there's this idea that you have to be willing to look foolish in order to do comedy.
Yeah.
And it's odd how it never seemed like there was a lack of women willing to look foolish, but there were men around them who would say, "You must not want to do that. That's a problem."
Yeah, yeah. But, you know, you think of the guys that were funny, I suppose the same thing applies. It's just that guys have more tradition of the character actor being well known, whereas there aren't so many women character actors, as in ordinary looking people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you kind of get your two options, one of which is you have to be extraordinarily beautiful, and then you're sort of like a very nice, you know, ottoman,
Yes.
which is, you know, you put your feet on it and you look at it. Or you can be very unattractive and do embarrassing things.
Exactly.
And that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
But that doesn't happen in your book.
No.
Spoiler alert.
She's a very beautiful girl who only wants to be funny.
Yeah, I think there's a wonderful part in it where she realizes how much she's willing to go to in order to have the kind of career that she wants. Earlier on in the book, she realizes she thinks that her father is dying. He's had a heart attack. It's early in the book, I'm not giving anything away. And she realizes that she's the kind of person who would refuse to go home to see her own father if there was a chance that she could move ahead in her career. And it's not because she's you know, a greedy person. It's because she's finally found something that she loved and she's desperate not to lose it.
Yeah, well, it's all set up that we used to have this series called Comedy Playhouse, and it was just a series of pilots. It was a really cool idea. So every week you would watch a completely different comedy show, and if the public liked it and critics liked it, then it would become a series. So Steptoe and Son, which became Sanford and Son in the States, that began life in that way.
Which I did not know until I read this book, by the way.
And Till Death Us Do Part, which became All in the Family, that was also a comedy playhouse.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I have to say there were moments in this book where I had to stop and look up if this was something you made up or really happened. Because some of them were so English, I thought this can't be real.
Yeah.
But they were.
They were real. Till Death Us Do Part was this, you know, quite shocking show because I guess it caused some controversy right in the 70s. Is it All in the Family?
Yes, it caused a little bit.
Well, this was like 1965 in England, and it caused a lot of controversy. And it was this comedy playhouse. Well, what I was trying to say was that she is prepared to not see her father again, who has had a heart attack, because she's got this one shot. She's in this comedy playhouse. If she doesn't go in it, someone else will go in it, and that's it. The moment's passed for her. So those are the choices.
I think one of the things that I love so much about this book is it feels like the story of a woman who falls in love with a job. And that's not something that you get to see often, and I was wondering how much of that felt like that way when you were writing the book, and how much you saw this as a love affair between a woman and work.
Yeah, that was, well, the first impulse was to write about collaborative work and the beauty of being part of the team where it feels like a collective mind has been formed because the right people walk into a room at the right time.
Right, with Bill and Tony, especially, who I think were based on a real life writing team.
We had a couple of writing teams in the 60s, men, and
good for them.
Bill and Tony in the book particularly admire these writers called Galton and Simpson, and Galton and Simpson, who were geniuses, I think. There's a rather beautiful thing about them, which is that they met right at the end of the war, and they both had TB, they both had tuberculosis, and they were both really ill. One of them had the last rites read when he was 18 or 19, and they were recovering in a TB clinic together, and they started talking about comedy, and that was it. When they came out of the TB clinic, they started trying to write gags for people, and they're still alive now, they still work together now, they still speak with one mind. They wrote to me about the book, and we thought it was great.
That's fantastic.
Like 80-something years old, and I wanted to use, I wanted that meet cute. It's such a great thing to meet at a TV clinic and form a comedy partnership.
Well, and if memory serves, you changed that a little in the book, don't you?
Well, in the book, Bill is gay and Tony is gay stroke bisexual, and they meet in a gentleman's toilet in 1950 something because they're lonely and they're serving in the army, and they go and try to meet somebody, but all they meet is a policeman who arrests them, but individually. So there's no sex, and the first time they meet each other, they're embarrassed and in a police cell. They are very much both of those things, and I love the way that you show them writing as young men, and then again writing together later as old men, and you can see the ways in which their various, I don't know if I would say choices so much as they each found something about themselves they couldn't give up and they wanted to choose. Yeah. I mean, you see where those choices lead them, and it feels like neither one would want to trade places with the other, but they're also both a little envious of what the other has. Yes, exactly. Was that something that you were sort of intending to do? Yes. As the book developed, I realised that I was sort of writing about the myth of John Lennon and Paul McCartney, because Paul's always the one who's supposed to write the 3-minute pop songs. Right, the upbeat, happy ones. And then that everybody loves. John just wrote in his own blood. John wrote his own blood and went to bed for a month and married a performance artist, and was generally regarded as the one who kind of freaked out, and the centre couldn't hold and they bust up. And there is a version of that with Bill and Tony, but it's not because I'm sort of paying homage to the Beatles, it's more that that's so true of so many couples, partnerships, that unless you're moving in step, then it's very hard to stay married or to stay working together or do anything. Yeah, and there's several little moments, especially with his marriage with June, and then also later with Barbara, Sophie's own marriage, where somebody starts off making a small choice, and they have to continue choosing it more and more, and it keeps taking them further in a direction. Yeah. And I don't think I've read a book recently that had so many looks at quietly fulfilling marriages that weren't necessarily big and dramatic and had lots of obstacles thrown in them, but were about two people who had a unique set of problems, but chose each other on a daily basis and got a lot of joy out of a mutual partnership. Yes, and they are both of those marriages in the book. It's really because the people are intellectually compatible. You know, you're not supposed to write about happy marriages. It's hard. But it is, and that's something that I think I loved about the book, was it was never about two people who just found it effortless. Especially, you know, there's a couple scenes with both of the couples where they go to bed together and it's a challenge. Yes. But they find it lovely. They do find it lovely. Eventually. And they're kind of embarrassed together, and they're kind of shy together. And I was wondering how you saw those, if you saw those two marriages as being connected in any way. I guess they are connected. I guess that what connects them is their devotion to the work, and because they're all four people equally devoted to doing good work, that's the thing that powers them through the rest of their lives. And with the one marriage or relationship that doesn't pan out, it's with a character who's with somebody who really sees him more as not quite a meal ticket, but someone who's certainly not his intellectual partner, somebody who doesn't understand his work. Yes. And so it was so interesting to see how their marriages all seem to make up a big collective hive mind. Well, I guess one of the things that's interesting about the 60s for me when I was writing this book is that I think pretty much we now accept the idea that all forms of culture are the same, that there's not so much the high and the low anymore, despite lots of arguments about literary fiction versus commercial fiction and arts and other mainstream. Is there a controversy about that? I haven't heard. But I think in the 60s, television was full of people who just disapproved of stuff all the time. And there was a proper argument about whether we were all going to the dogs because we were laughing at television programs or not. Yeah, and she sort of addresses that in the end. She sort of says, wow, if
if I'd realized we were opening things up to all these jokes about, you know, very, very personal hygiene issues, I might not have wanted to be a part of it.
Yes, and I often wonder whether that generation of comedians, when they're always cited in interviews as being influencers, they think, really? Really? That's what I did? So that this woman could talk about vaginal deodorant? That was me? That was somehow responsible for that?
No comment on that part. But yeah, it is interesting too how it's set in the very middle of the 60s. So it's a group of people who are always a little bit torn between generations. Yeah. There's that great bit where she talks about she can't be old because her memories aren't in black and white. She remembers things being in color. And there is a sense that they're always wondering, you know, are we going to be Benny Hill, really go for broke? Are we going to be sort of elite and cerebral? What's the right way to do comedy?
Well, the thing about that generation growing old as well, I think this is a really interesting time because, you know, the 60s and 70s people are becoming elderly. And
present company excluded.
But they are not anyone's notion of what an older person is like. You know, if you knocked around with Andy Warhol, you can't be an old person.
Yeah, it's not sort of sweet memories of, you know, dancing the waltz by the seaside. It's, we went to Hare for our first date, and then we took poppers.
Yes. And of course in Britain there's a big thing about the wartime, and that generation has sort of nearly died out now. The older people now were born in 1945 into a new England entirely.
Yeah, I do want to make sure that we talk about this a little bit. It's really interesting to me. I know, especially with your work on adapting and education, your work on adapting Wild, and in this book now, people have asked you a lot about writing for women, as if we are aliens. How did you do it? As if we don't have, you know, feelings and insights, much like people do. And then I noticed, I think on page 68, Bill and Tony are trying to write a woman, and they're finding it impossible. And then they meet a woman, and she helps them.
Yes.
And I was wondering if in some way, is that your response to that? Is that a commentary on anything in particular? Or just a coincidence?
Well, the whole sort of gender question I find quite perplexing. Because I think if you try and write at all, if you're writing about somebody who is not yourself, then everybody's equally...
Right, you're already using your imagination.
Yeah, exactly.
Just imagine breasts.
And, and the idea that, for example, a woman like Sophie, who's passionate about comedy and about various forms of culture, that she would somehow be harder for me to write because I'm a guy than, for example, the guy who wrote American Sniper. The guy who wrote American Sniper
probably has never sniped anyone.
Well, no, he sniped away. But,
you mean the novel?
Yeah, the memoir. Yes. But that's not a guy I know or understand, and I would find that way more of a stretch than to write about somebody like Sophie. And when it's memoir as well, because An Education was a small piece of memoir, and Wild was a gigantic memoir, and people say, how did you get inside Cheryl Strayed's head? She wrote a book full of all her feelings and thoughts about how do you get inside that woman's head? It's a very strange question.
Do you feel like that's a question that you keep getting, or do you feel so people are still asking you?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's you ask it in a different way. You ask why people keep asking the question.
Well, it's so odd to me because whenever I see it asked, I always think, well, we're right here. You could ask us.
Yes.
And I think you said in another interview, you sort of talked about different things happen to you when you walk into a room and you're a beautiful woman, versus if you're, you know, a guy who's sort of nondescript looking. But you still walk into a room. The same elements are still there.
Exactly.
There's still desires, conflict, needs, ambition. That doesn't change. You're just better looking. And I just find it really interesting that some people think it's that difficult.
Well, I think that a lot of my career has been seen through, especially in England, because my first book was about football.
Right.
And if your first book is about football, then that's it forever.
You can only care about one gender at a time.
One gender at a time, one thing at a time. I still have seen descriptions of myself as a football novelist. I mean, I haven't written a football novel, but I'm a football novelist.
It makes it sound like you've written a book about an actual football.
Yes.
Like Wilson from Castaway.
Maybe I'll try that.
Yeah. I think that people would read that. Something else that I wanted to talk about, kind of in addition to this book in general, because I've seen a lot written about your sort of stance on the literary versus readable divide in books, which sort of exists and sort of doesn't. But you've talked a lot about your willingness and your frankness to say that you don't always finish books.
Yes.
And that maybe if you don't read a particular type of book, or if you don't finish it, nothing bad will happen to you. Don't you know you're not allowed to say those things?
Well, I mean, it's such a complicated argument, I think, the argument about books, because ultimately there is a certain section of people that believe that if you read a certain kind of fiction, then you are morally improved in some way. And I think this is rubbish. Not least because some of the nastiest, meanest people you could ever hope to meet are English professors. You know, they are prone to the same kinds of ambition and backbiting and envy and stupidity as the rest of us, but they've read everything. So you think, well, nothing good has happened to you as read these books. But my main concern is that we start to reinforce the notion of reading as duty. So if you're sticking to a book that you're not enjoying and thinking, okay, well, maybe 5 more pages tonight, only 3 tomorrow night, in 2 years I'll be done. You're more likely to watch the television as a result.
Yeah, I think I remember you saying somewhere that you said most people, when they come home, they turn on the TV and they wait to read until they go to bed because there's this idea that reading's a chore and television is fun. And I think it's kind of sad when we divide it into either this is an ennobling pursuit that you must do in order to become a certain type of person, or you can have a good time. And there's no in between.
No, and I blame a lot of
the
literary culture for that saying this is the good book, this is the book that's won the Booker Prize.
Would you like to name some names of people you'd like to blame?
People that I'd like to blame.
Yeah, let's get it out there.
Well, there was...
You don't have to.
No, there was something that still makes my blood boil, which was a few years ago, a group of us writers were asked what book every child should have read by the time they left school. And me and one other person, to eternal credit, the lovely poet Wendy Cope, said, that's ridiculous. I mean, every child, what are you talking about? Are you talking about Bangladeshi kids who've just been in Britain for the last 3 or 4 years? Are you talking about kids with special needs? So you're not talking about every kid, are you? You're talking about a certain kind of well-educated child. And I just want a kid to have found a book that he or she loves by the time they leave school and have read that like 15 times. But our poet laureate at the time, Andrew Motion, said that every child should have read number 1 Ulysses. And it went on, the list went on, and it was like 10 books that I hadn't. He said every child should have read, and you just think, this is insane. This is the best way to say to a child, once you leave school, you never have to read again.
I'm just imagining a lot of 9-year-olds running around trying to parse the
Well, that's when you need to start, doesn't it? You're going to finish by the time you're 18.
Yeah, but there's sometimes I think this idea that reading shouldn't be about finding something that speaks to you or that creates a reaction in you, whether that's emotional or spiritual or intellectual. It should just be a laundry list.
That's the thing that drives me nuts, and why I always tell people to put down books that they're struggling with. A few years ago...
you heard it here first. Nick Hornby wants kids not to read.
I'm sure a couple of years ago, I don't know how long ago it was, when Yung Chang's big biography of Mao came out. And you know, it's supposed to be a wonderful book, but I had 2 friends reading it at the same time. And one told me that she dreamt that she'd finished it. When she woke up in the morning and she saw that she started. And another one told me that he picked it up one night and was delighted to see he'd read 300 pages more than he thought he had. But it turned out his kid had dropped the book and put it well, I'm sure this is an amazing book, and there will come a time in your life when you can put aside a month to really tackle that book properly. But right now,
maybe
it's not that
for everyone
time. Yes.
at all times.
Yes.
Is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Books can exist in a context. That's really something.
Yes.
All right, so you now have permission to put down the book that you've been telling yourself you had to finish. Everybody pick one. That's right. Feel that freedom. There's something else I wanted so much to talk to you about in the book. You guys are really excited about this. And I loved it because it described something that I've done so often in my own life, but I've never actually seen in print before. And it's when Barbara is thinking about how she watches Lucille Ball. And her father doesn't understand why she loves I Love Lucy because she doesn't laugh when she watches it. She watches it, I think you talk about, almost like it's a religion. And if she could watch it every day and rewatch episodes she'd seen before, she would. And she concentrates obsessively. And that's something that I used to do, I still do. If I really love something, especially comedy, I will watch it to the point of almost pain because I feel like I can't get close enough to this.
Yeah.
I want this inside of me, inside of my eyes, in a way that I don't need to laugh at it because I want it to be a part of who I am. And I love that you put that in here.
Okay, good.
And I just was...
I can never, because I was a child in the 60s and I have children myself now, I can't work out how my mother told me that I had to wait for a week to see the next week's show. We seem to understand it intuitively that we couldn't do anything about it, but my kids look at me as if I'm nuts. So I'm just going to watch it again now.
I mean, it's such a wonderful age for that. I came in on the tail end of that. I remember having to wait a week, and now I never want to have to wait to consume anything ever again. I can just watch TV until it hurts.
Yes, I haven't made the series yet, which is really annoying.
There are some TV shows that I think I will start watching it when it goes off the air. Because then I know. Because I know.
I might say till when hell freezes over.
I don't want to be left hanging.
The Young and the Restless.
Please keep naming shows that you can actually watch it. Yeah, I just think that that's something, as soon as that became a technology that was available to us, I'm just like, this is what human civilization has been building towards.
Learning people's comedy routine.
This is what it was all for. Yeah. Well, I think that you talk a little bit about the old blood donor sketch, which was so much fun. I remember, is it the Four Yorkshiremen sketch where they're all sitting around complaining about how they live in boots?
Yes.
That was my blood donor sketch when I was a kid, and I would watch it over and over again. And I was wondering if that was
Python.
Yes.
You were
just I would have loved to have been beaten by my father in the middle of the street because I grew up in a shoebox and my father cut off my head every and I would just I wanted to inhabit that world, and I thought you captured that so well in the sense of somebody sees something and they realize for the first time in their life, I will give anything to be a part of this. Not because I want a lot of money, not because I want to be famous. I want to be in this room with these people creating these ideas as much as I can.
Yeah, and the good experiences I've had with movies over the last few years, that's been what it's like for me.
Now I'm really jealous.
I just think, why can't we just do this all over again? And it's sad because you never can, because it's not the same project, it's not the same cast, and you just want to carry on being with those people because something happened and it was the right director and the right producer and the right cast. And I think an education was really like that. And Wild was different because I wasn't, they were here and I was at home, and Reese was kind of on her own anyway. But an education was this ensemble cast, and Kerry was new, and something just sparked, and it was wonderful.
I think it's so interesting that you talk about that, because I think you also mentioned at one point in an interview about how shows like this used to get numbers in the millions, and now there are shows like Mad Men that have become cultural touchdowns, but not very many people watch it. But one of the things I think that draws to people about Mad Men that is also part of what drew me to this book is you don't see a lot of places that can capture the magic of good work. When you're working with people you respect and admire, and when you have that moment where someone has an idea and you just think this is it, this is worth following, and it's in some ways as interesting and passionate and creative as a really good marriage. I assume.
Yes. I think it's interesting. I mean, Mad Men obviously is a little bit less artsy because it's advertising, but it's still writers and filmmakers, and this book is about television comedy. No one's written a really good book about how exciting it is to
Write comedy.
Design baths.
Oh, well.
Or something industrial, because actually we don't know anything about it.
Well, I think it would need to be somebody who really knew what it was like to design a bath, and you've never designed a bath.
So, yeah. But it's a shame that that world of work doesn't get touched so much, because no writer knows enough about it.
Well, if anyone knows
done a day's work
of a really great book about the magic of interior design, please come find us afterwards and let us know.
Where it's a team of mind and
yeah,
some excitement.
The shower room, can't go there, you fool. Something like that. Yeah, and I hope it's not spoiling, but the last lines of the book are about a woman. Wow, okay, that counts as a spoiler. That's really good to know. I apologize. No one's thinking, no one does any work. You're looking at me, that's great. And we've got a couple of minutes before we're going to switch into a Q&A. I think you mentioned you wanted to read from part of the book.
I would like to read.
Would you like to do that now?
Yeah. I'm going to read, so the team have made this pilot, and now they're about to write the first episode, or make the first episode. And the writers have decided that they want it to be about sex, and there hasn't been anything about sex on television particularly. And it's going to end with Barbara and Jim, the married couple, having sex for the first time, even though they've been married for a little while. At the end of the read-through, Dennis made the Big Ben noises intended to indicate that the marriage between Jim and Barbara had been consummated, but nobody laughed or cheered. Bill and Tony were too busy trying to gauge the expressions on the faces of Sophie and Clive. Sophie and Clive, expressionless, were too busy flicking back through the pages of the script, trying to work out precisely what had been intimated about their characters' sex lives. When I say, Sophie began. Yes, Bill said. Oh, I see, right. Which page? 15. Go on. Well, does that mean what I think it means? Yes. Are we allowed to say that? Well, we're not saying it. Bill, Dennis said patiently, I don't mind making that argument to the powers that be, but let's be fair to our cast. Yes, Sophie, we are saying, implying, said Bill, we are saying that Barbara is sexually experienced. Oh, bloody hell! We don't have to, said Dennis, if you're not comfortable with it. Oh, don't we, said Tony. What else have you got then, Dennis? What don't you like about it, Sophie? Said Dennis. Well, just stupid things, you know, my dad and my Auntie Mari and... But they know it's made up. Well, sort of. I'm never quite sure whether they've got the hang of it. You know, Barbara's from Blackpool and I'm from Blackpool. She's called Barbara and I was called Barbara. It's confusing. Suddenly she was aware of everybody looking at her. You were called Barbara, said Clive. Oh, said Barbara. Well, yes, I used to be. When? Well, until the week before you met me. Why didn't you say anything when we decided to call her Barbara? Well, I didn't know what was allowed then. Please don't call me Barbara all the time now. You're seriously used to being called Sophie already. She thought about it and realised she was. A part of her felt like she'd only really begun her life when she moved to London, which meant that she'd been called Sophie for most of her life. Yes, she said, Barbara is a fictional character in the series we're making. And she left it at that. Well, can we talk about me now, said Clive. You're saying in this that I'm a virgin. Well, you're like my Auntie Mari, said Sophie. It's Jim who's the virgin and he's not real. Yes, but will people believe it? Why wouldn't they believe it, Clive? Sophie could see that they were all trying to suppress mirth, but Bill's poker face was so expert that he'd been charged with the job of Mickey taking. Well, I know Jim's fictional, but I'm... Yes? Clive stopped and tried a different tap. Well, isn't it the other way round, conventionally? The man has had sexual experience and the woman hasn't? Bill groaned and then stared at him pityingly. What? It is, yes, said Tony. That's the sort of the point of the script. I don't know if you've noticed, but we're trying not to do the conventional thing. Well, in which case, said Clive, I will just have to not give a damn about appearing immodest and voice my other objection, which is this: nobody will believe it. Which part? Said Tony. I don't mean Barbara's experience, they'll be fine with that. No offence there. A lot taken, said Sophie. It's Jim. Jim, to my mind, is not a virgin. Yeah, I didn't think he would be, to your mind. I can act, you know, insecurity and donnishness and shyness and the rest of it, but I can't do anything about what I look like. I didn't think you'd have the nerve to go through with it, said Bill, but you have. I make no apologies for frankness. I'm not quite sure I understand what he's being frank about, said Sophie. Clive thinks he's too good looking to be a virgin. Sophie laughed. Clive looked pained. It's a serious point, said Clive. I knew I'd be mocked for it, but that doesn't make it less valid. You don't have to wear specs and have acne to be a virgin, said Bill. I understand, but don't you think it shows on my face? Bill wrinkled his nose up in disgust. What? Well, experience. Sophie looked at him because he was inviting scrutiny and decided that even though he probably had slept with loads of girls, there was an innocence that could be mistaken for sexual inexperience. He hadn't lived much as far as she could see. He'd spent too much time waiting around for something to happen to him. And anyway, said Clive, why am I a virgin until the end of the script? What we're implying, said Tony, is that, you know, you're hopeless. Meaning? Well, there are various forms of hopelessness, obviously. The one we were thinking of was impotence. Clive slumped into his chair. He couldn't speak for several moments. Where does it say that? It doesn't. Oh, bloody hell, where is it implied? Page 9. Did you not understand a word you were saying just now? I just read the lines, I didn't think about them. He scanned the page. Oh, Christ! Hydraulic failure? What would happen if I marched straight round to see a solicitor the morning after the first episode has gone out? A solicitor? Well, there's got to be something legal here, slander, libel, something. Well, you'd be suing a fictional character who you'd agreed to play. I'd go to every day of that trial if it came to court. I should never agree to those brackets, said Clive. I'll be saying that for the rest of my life. Sorry, the series is called Barbara Brackett and Jim Brackett. It might have been the brackets that made us think of it, said Tony. They're sort of a droopy punctuation mark, aren't they? Well, said Clive, mark my words, nobody is going to believe it. Thank you.
I think now is the time where if any of you have questions, you get to ask them. So you should make the most of this opportunity.
On that or any other subject?
Yeah, you can ask us any. Hello, yes.
So, would you say that a lot of your work is solitary and that your collaborating process has come sort of later after you've published your books and so forth?
The question was about solitary versus collaborative. Yes, I got to a point where I realised that if there was any chance of collaborating with anyone on anything, then I would do it, because I'd written 6 or 7 books on my own, and I was getting sick of the sound of not hearing my own voice, I guess. So an education was maybe the beginning of it. I wrote an album with Ben Folds, which involved a lot of backwards and forwards, Wild, and I've adapted Colin Toybeen's Brooklyn, which is coming later in the year. And the film, I can't tell you, is so beautiful. It's an amazing movie that has been made. But I just wanted to work with other people where I could. And even, of course, script writing. I'm script writing on my own, but it's in shorter bursts, and there are meetings and people talk and you get feedback. And I'd like to mix it up as much as I can for the rest of the career I have available. Hi.
Hi. I actually was lucky enough to see Brooklyn, and I wanted to ask.
The movie?
It's Sunday.
Oh, did you go?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Oh, wow.
And I was going to ask about your process when you're script writing from someone else's material, as in this case, and also how is that different from your original thoughts and my story process?
The question for those at the back is about adaptation and how is it different. I've often thought the last few years that even though I've tried to make the books as different as I can from each other, there is a bit of me that feels as though I'm Jim Carrey in The Truman Show and I'm rowing away as far as I can, but I keep bumping into the walls of my own skull. And I think, there I am again, it's only me again. And the fantastic thing about adaptation is there's a trapdoor out of my own skull and into somebody else's, and I can use whatever skills I might have as a dramatist or a dialogue writer or a constructor of narrative and scenes, but it's not me anymore. It's Cheryl, or it's Colin Toybeen, or it was Lynn Barber with An Education, and I couldn't have written Wild for about 1 million different reasons, and yet I get to adapt it, and it really feels fresh to be able to have a go at someone else's work like that. And all of that fed into this book anyway, because it was about groups of people working together. There comes a point also with movies where things get stuck, and like we had such agony making Brooklyn, I can't tell you, like 5 years of agony, and things collapse, and there's a line in Martin Amos's book, Money, I think, where the narrator John Self describes himself smoking a cigarette, and he said, actually, just presume that unless I say something to the contrary, I'm always smoking a cigarette. And with Brooklyn, it's just like, unless we say something to the contrary, the financing has always collapsed. There's never no point where the financing hasn't collapsed. And eventually I got so fed up with things being stuck all over the place, thought it would be great to write a novel where nothing gets stuck, but it's about the same process and no one's stopping me because I can just write it. So it was a kind of happy byproduct of frustration as well.
Thank you.
Anyone in the back half? You're being very quiet. Hi.
So to your point about not foisting great books lists on people in schools, do you feel that you had a classical education?
Do I feel I had a classical education? I went to the local state school. It was, I cannot believe how uncreative the school was. I really know how to parse a sentence. If you want a sentence parsed, I'm a man. But I don't think we were allowed to write anything that was made up after the age of 11. And I didn't then write anything that was made up until I was 25. So between the ages of 11 and 25, nothing came from my own imagination at all.
Like the most creative time.
Yes, well,
Not that
no, yes, right.
I think there was a question in the back.
How is it that you were chosen to do Wild? I mean, how did
it happen?
Yeah, it seems like not a given.
It happened, well, I chased it. I read the book as soon as it came out. I read that great New York Times review that Dwight Garner wrote, and I thought, I have to read this book. And as I was reading it, I thought, this is a fantastic movie. And I felt really connected to that book because Cheryl felt like someone like me. It's a lot of that book is about wanting to write and connection with poetry and music and feeling messed up at a certain point in one's life, and that's the stuff I connected to. And she's not writing from the perspective of a hiker. If that book had been about, this is what it's like to hike, this is what it's like to really do it properly, it was about someone who didn't know how to do it properly, learned how to do it, and I felt that I was in that position, as I think we all did when we were reading it. But I thought I'm going to find out who owns it, and by that stage Reese had already bought it, and I'd met her a couple of times and we talked about working together, so I was able to reach out to her via people and say, I would really, really like a shot at adapting this, and have you got a writer? And she was happy to give me a go. Hi.
Hi. Thanks for your reading on The Party Girl. When you read it, it's so cinematic, just in terms of you can see it. And I was wondering about your own cinematic education and how that affects, how that's impacted your success as a screenwriter.
The question is about my own cinematic education. Well, you see, I dispute your terms. I think that what you're saying is cinematic is something that you can see and hear, and for me that's the kind of fiction I love to read and to write, that those people are real to me, and I can hear that dialogue when I'm writing it, and I can see those people, and so it's my version of a visual medium, I suppose, but it's because of the kind of fiction I have a taste for, and the kind of fiction that I want to write, and that sense of being absorbed in a book because those people are real to you. That's what I want readers to have, and I don't know if it's necessarily anything to do with the other art form. But of course, any writer my age, younger, is going to have been influenced by the TV that they watched when they were a kid, the films that they watched when they were a kid, and that probably went in there as much as any books I was reading at the time.
There's a woman in glasses who had her hand up for a long time. And
I'm sorry.
I do mean you.
Once, I was going to represent the last half of the room. Somebody beat
I just wanted to make sure you didn't get lost in the shuffle.
No, that was kind of the thing. So I was just reading through, the end of the book and all the things you've written. And there are not that many writers that read. I love everything you've done. And I just
Thank you.
I just wondered, when you finish something, do you ever have doubts about its quality or merit? Do you ever finish something and not think it's great?
Oh my God. I've never thought anything was great. My working practice for a long time has been to give my wife what I estimate to be roughly a third of everything that I write. And the question I have for her is not, I don't want notes, I don't want any kind of advice. I want her to tell me if I've gone completely mad. Because my sense of perspective has gone so much that, that thing in The Shining, I think any writer knows that when he's written all work and no play makes Jack a boy over and over again. Lots of writers think that's how they've spent their day, basically writing the same sentence over and over again. So I have no perspective, and you never do have any perspective, I don't think. The only thing you can wait for is for people to read it and say they love it, and not everybody does, but hopefully enough people do. I have to say, another thing I quite like about working in movies is that it's brutal, and if you write a script that people don't like, they just say, no, we're not going to make this. You think anyone's going to give you $10 million to make this picture? You must be out of your mind. So you've got to do 15 more drafts, or just chuck this one out altogether. Whereas there comes a point when you've had a career in books where people will go, Oh, okay. And you think, well, what does that mean? Okay. You're going to publish it. You're going to publish it anyway, won't you? You're going to publish it anyway. It's in your catalogue for next year. And it makes you paranoid. And I quite like the purity of film, which is pure evil. But there is a purity about the evil. But yeah, I am very doubtful about my own work. Hi, another one at the back there.
Thanks. This may be a little personal. I've read, I think, everything of yours except the latest, and especially early works that are about profoundly lonely, isolated people, long way down, fever pitch, and who have a connection to a group, you know, and some sort of belonging, and but not through another individual. They really find it in the sense of belonging to a group or an ideal like a football club or something.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can comment about that. It seems a bit cynical about the idea of connecting individually with people. Even with Juliet Naked, for example, it's like being a star, but you can't really connect with people there.
Well, I think that the kinds of books that I write, there is something inbuilt about the mix of comedy and pathos. And there is something both funny and sad about people failing to connect. I guess most things are about that, really. I think probably everything does come from emotional fever pitch. Like, I couldn't connect with my dad, so I found this great big community to connect with. And in About a Boy, I suppose it's an impromptu family that's formed. Certainly A Long Way Down is an impromptu family. And I think we all know there's something rather beautiful about getting to choose your own family as well. It's the dream, isn't it? So even if it's an ugly, misshapen family, at least it's not your own. It's good that I'm a long way from home.
I'm told we have time for about 2 more.
Okay. Hi.
Hi there. The question I'd like to ask, I guess, rolls even off of what you just made a comment on family. In your own context as being parents who are both cultural creatives, how do you think about your role as a parent in nurturing children today to be their most creative selves?
Well, I can only answer that by saying I have 3 boys. They don't have a creative bone in their bodies. They play FIFA on their Xbox. I've tried to encourage them to play that creatively. There's not a lot of wiggle room as far as I can see. I mean, they are. My kids are growing up in a house because my wife is an independent producer, and they are growing up in a house where I think the best thing for them is that they can see that stories are not just kid stuff, that stories are things that you can take very seriously, and you know, we end up talking about story a lot at home, and I'm hoping that there's some kind of osmosis, and that eventually they'll think, hold on, actually, this is their job. And maybe there's something in this creativity stuff after all, but it's hard for me to imagine them being creative without them realising that there is a financial incentive. I should take one more from back. No, there's the uncommitted back there. Hi.
Hi. What is your favorite piece of writing that you've written?
Wow. The favourite piece of writing. Do you mean like a paragraph or?
I guess like a novel or a book or anything.
Wow. I think everything I've written has got some things that I was quite pleased with in it. I have to say, I would say this book has got the most in it that I'm happiest with in terms of consistency, and it was really a joy to write, as much as writing is ever a joy. There are all sorts of pieces where I thought, oh, that was a good day, I think the movies can't be, because they were the product of other minds as well, even if you wrote the screenplay, and probably in education was the happiest experience in terms of working with people. And the book I'm always most fond of is High Fidelity, because that was my first novel, and Fever Pitch was a memoir, and you think, well, okay, I've written a memoir, but I can't write too many of those. Actually, I haven't done very much, apart from watch football. A novel, well, if I get this right, then I could maybe do that again and again and again, and that's really the great thing about a novel working. It does liberate you to think, actually, I might have a life doing this.
Well, Nick Hornby, thanks for talking with us.